Thank you very much for that nice introduction, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. It's a great honor for me to come and address this group. I think few would argue against the premise that CPRIT actually promises to be one of the greatest initiatives ever undertaken on behalf of cancer research. It consists of 3 programs: a research program, which is the largest, a product development program, which is intended to support the fledgling biotech industry in Texas and facilitate the development of devices and products used to treat cancer patients. And it has a prevention program which provides prevention services and education throughout the state, but does not do any research. It is supported by bond funds. This was voted in by the citizens of Texas and initiated by the Texas legislature a number of years ago. And it's supported at the level of $3 billion over a 10-year period, which is really remarkable. The impact of its support on cancer research in Texas is profound, especially at this time of very limited funding from other sources. In fact, in 2014, the National Cancer Institute awarded around $200 million in grants in the state of Texas. CPRIT now awards about $250 million for research, product development, and recruitment awards, more than doubling the investment in cancer research in the state. Thank you. To date, CPRIT's prevention program has supported cancer screenings and prevention and survivor services to nearly 2 million Texans, mainly underserved populations, and has touched every county in the state. CPRIT's research recruitment awards have helped attract top quality scientists to the state, some of whom are in this room with us today, making Texas the envy of cancer researchers and cancer administrators across the country. These great benefits of the CPRIT initiatives were, of course, what prompted me to abandon retirement 2 years ago to see if I could help revive what appeared to be an agency in danger of losing its funding and its support from the state legislature. So what I would like to do today is to summarize what was in the research portfolio during the first years of its operation, the reconstitution of the peer review system, the reauthorization and restart of CPRIT, the Oversight Committee's prioritization project for research, and then future directions for the research program. Now, in the beginning, the strategy of CPRIT's research program was to fund the very best science on any cancer-related topic offered up by the scientific community in Texas. And this was accomplished through a variety of excellent research granting mechanisms, which are shown here. We had individual investigator awards, a very innovative program of idea grants, small grants that were supposed to fund high-impact, high-risk initiatives. There were multi-investigator grants, and so on. Now, the majority of the grants that were funded were investigator-initiated grants. If we can see, no, it doesn't, there. That's the number, the percentage of grants in that category. Second are the high-impact, high-risk grants, and then the multi-investigator awards. But in terms of dollars invested, the dollar amounts for individual investigator awards is almost the same as that invested in the multi-investigator awards, which comprise about 150 different research projects and cores that are all collaborative and form the basis of collaborative research programs. In total, I think there were around 285 grants and about $450 million awarded. We don't actually expect these proportions to change, particularly in the near future. In terms of the subject matter of these awards, the majority of grants were in cancer biology and genetics, as you might expect, and the other largest proportion is in treatment, drug development, and translational research. And then there are other initiatives in imaging and diagnostics and so on. In terms of the recruitment awards, there were at that time 56 awards at a total of $170 million, and I'll tell you some more about those in a moment. Now, the mechanism to ensure that only the highest quality work would be supported was through the creation of a peer review system of the very highest caliber, composed of senior investigators who are leaders in their field and who reside outside the state of Texas. When I was recruited to CPRIT, around 60% of the reviewers had resigned. The Scientific Review Council, which is composed of the chairs of each of the panels, had no leader, and only one of the 6 chairs remained. So my first task was therefore to reconstitute the review panels using the superb models established by my predecessor, Dr. Al Gilman. So when CPRIT was able to restart its operation after a year's moratorium, the remaining SRC member, Dr. Richard Kolodner, became the SRC leader, the Scientific Review Council leader. One panel chair, Dr. Sam Gambier, agreed to return, and 6 new chairs were appointed, and they in turn repopulated the panel with around 90 new and returning members, bringing us to a total of about 150 reviewers for this program today. The only change that I made in reconstituting the groups were to try to broaden the expertise of the panel members slightly to include more in cancer biology and cancer prevention and population-based research, which brings me really to the next topic of the new CPRIT, which has been called CPRIT 2.0. So my second goal in coming to CPRIT was to see if we could broaden the emphasis of cancer research to include more work on prevention and early detection, rather than focusing exclusively on trying to cure advanced cancer. I thought that by using the same excellent grant mechanisms initially developed, it should be possible to rebalance the portfolio somewhat. This idea was reinforced by an analysis done a few years ago by the National Cancer Advisory Board, which examined the sources of support for cancer research nationally. And you can see here that industry supports the lion's share of cancer research nationally. This is the National Cancer Institute, at that time around $5 billion a year. This is other federal agencies, foundations, and philanthropic agencies. And this, if we add to this figure what CPRIT contributes, you can see that although it's a huge amount in Texas, it is actually a small amount relative to the national investment in cancer research. So this suggests that if CPRIT is to have a serious impact on cancer, we should not just add incrementally to what others are funding, but we should think more strategically about how to deploy our limited funds for maximum benefit. And my view is that in addition to continuing to fund untargeted cancer research, we should also invest in some of the underfunded areas of cancer research where there are now new opportunities for progress. So if we look at today's research in cancer, we see that it is heavily focused on cures. You probably can't read this, but even though the American Association for Cancer Research says making cures together. So they're focusing on cures. We all, of course, appreciate the work done by Komen for the Cure, which is also cures focused. And in fact, most of the advocacy groups in cancer really are all about cures. The development of drugs and biologicals that target genetic alterations unique to cancer cells is a very common theme. Although it is both necessary and important to develop more effective, less toxic anti-cancer agents, this approach has been less beneficial than we expected. Cancer-free survival periods have lengthened, but few real cures have been achieved using this approach. And the major obstacle to improved survival is, of course, the biological heterogeneity of cancer due to the genetic instability of cancer cells, and especially of metastatic cells. It is still true today that 90% of cancer deaths are due to the emergence of metastases that are resistant to therapy, including our most sophisticated targeted therapies. So in addition to continuing to search for new treatments, we must also look for ways to prevent cancer and diagnose it earlier. Clearly, these areas have the greatest potential for reducing the burden of cancer, and they are underfunded relative to the search for cures. Let me give you one example. We all know that breast cancer, when detected, when it's localized, is 99% not curable. 5-year survival rate is 99% in women who are diagnosed at the earliest stage of breast cancer. But once the cancer has spread to distant sites, that figure dramatically reduces to 24% 5-year survival. So moving more diagnoses back to early stage, the earliest stage, has a profound effect on survival. It reduces the cost of treatment, and it reduces the human burden of a cancer diagnosis, the psychological burden, financial burden, emotional burdens of a cancer diagnosis and an extended treatment of advanced disease. Now, in the case of prevention, most people think about cancer prevention in terms of tobacco cessation and obesity, other lifestyle changes, which is appropriate considering their impact. But there is really much more. We need to know more about the biology of cancer progression. How do cancer cells move from being normal cells to precancerous cells, and what are the changes that occur from precancerous cells to frank neoplasia? We are rather busy studying the cancer itself, the end product, and I think we've neglected to study the process of carcinogenesis, which is really necessary if we're going to develop any new interventions. We also need to identify carcinogens. We need to protect people from occupational and incidental exposures to known and suspected carcinogens. We need to develop high-throughput screening methods to enable testing of the 80,000 chemicals that are in our environment, few of which have been tested for carcinogenicity. We need to monitor exposures. We need to develop new methods for measuring and monitoring personal exposure to things like pesticides, flame retardants, and a whole host of substances known or suspected to be carcinogenic. We need to be able to identify people at high risk of developing cancer, as you heard from Dr. Spitz earlier, so that earlier interventions can be applied. And we need to understand things like, why is cancer in children increasing? We need to know more about the role of pathogens in cancer development, because these all represent real, underfunded opportunities in prevention research. So this brings us to the prioritization project. And so serendipitously, when the legislation governing CPRIT was rewritten during its authorization, thanks really largely to the efforts of Senator Nelson and Representative Keffer, CPRIT's Oversight Committee was charged with establishing priorities for each of its 3 programs: research, product development, and prevention. So after a year-long effort that involved a facilitator, a retreat, input from a variety of advisory groups, and the public, the priorities were adopted last November. And the principle used to guide the development of priorities for research are shown here. First and foremost, we will always support scientific excellence and the impact on cancer. This was true in the beginning. It has been the hallmark of the program since its inception and should continue to be so. But to have a more strategic deployment of our funds, we will also target some underfunded areas, and we want to ensure that CPRIT outlives its program, the program itself, that the impact of the funding remains even if the program doesn't continue. And to do this, we aim to try to increase the life sciences infrastructure in Texas. So the specific research priorities that evolved from the process are shown here. First, we will continue to fund a broad range of innovative investigator-initiated research projects. But we also want to make some investments in prevention and early detection for reasons that I've told you before. We would also like to deal with some of the rare cancers. These are, of course, ones that are generally underfunded by other areas. Pharmaceutical industry is not particularly interested in investing in these areas, and because they are rare, they are difficult to study because of the paucity of material, the paucity of patients, and so on. And this, of course, is very much amenable to multi-institutional collaborative studies where we can bring together resources and patients from a variety of places. So we want to try to focus on some of the rare cancers, particularly childhood cancers, which after the great successes in the 1970s with chemotherapy, there have been very few new treatments brought forward for pediatric cancer for a variety of reasons. We also, then there are also the intractable cancers, which were mentioned earlier. The intractable cancers are generally thought of as lung, pancreas, liver, and brain. And we want to make sure that we pay some attention to cancers that are important in Texas. And there is a lot of overlap between these areas. Cancers of importance to Texas would be liver cancer, which is quite prevalent, is prevalent in excess in Texas relative to other places, cervical cancer, lung cancer, and so on. So these are the cancer areas. And we also would like to make some new investments in computational biology and analytic methods. It is clear that progress in these areas are going to be essential for doing the kind of high-throughput analyses, some of which you heard about this morning. And this is really a critical need that we should try to stimulate and fund for the future. So the question is, how will we implement all of these priorities? And that brings us to future directions. So we are just beginning to start implementation and discuss with the Oversight Committee what are the measures of success that we will use to know whether we've actually implemented priorities or not. But we think what we will start to do are the following. First of all, we will educate our chairs of the Scientific Review Council and our peer review panel members about what our priorities are and what we would like to emphasize in our program. We will develop targeted RFAs in areas of interest. We've actually already begun to do that in anticipation of or at least in the hopes that the Oversight Committee would adopt at least some of my priorities. We already put out an RFA on childhood cancers and another one on prevention and early detection. And I think this will have an impact. I can tell you that in a previous round of individual investigator grants that was untargeted, 3% of the grants awarded addressed childhood cancers. In the latest round, which is pending Oversight Committee approval, we expect that about 20% of the funded grants will be on childhood cancers. So I think we can have an impact by directing, by announcing what our priorities are and directing the requests for application to specific areas. And finally, we will continue to support recruitment grants and core facility grants to enable us to build and continue to build the infrastructure for the state. I want to just end on a very positive note with the Scholar Recruitment Awards. To date, we have recruited 80 outstanding investigators in cancer research to the state of Texas, for a total of $231 million. This is an incredible addition to our research portfolio in Texas, and it will create a legacy for CPRIT that will provide hundreds, if not thousands, of person years of innovative cancer and biomedical research for the future. So in conclusion, CPRIT is a Texas-sized undertaking. It is a bold initiative that is changing the landscape of cancer research in Texas, and it has the potential to truly reduce the burden of cancer, not just in Texas, but throughout the world. Thank you very much. Questions?
That was very nice. Thank you very much. It gives us renewed confidence in what the state of Texas can do in this area. I wanted to ask a question about the balance between the investigator-initiated grant award. And I was very happy, by the way, to see that the young investigators are taking up a large percentage
Of the recruits.
In your recruitment.
Yes, right.
But in the investigator-initiated grants, how that will be balanced against the RFAs. You know, if you are determining which areas people are to go in, and somebody comes in with something that's not in those areas. So how do you balance that?
The way we have done it so far, and will continue to do so, is when we put out an RFA for investigator-initiated research, we have one untargeted, and we have other ones that are targeted. And so in the last round, as I mentioned, 20% of the grants that we hope will be funded in this round are for childhood cancer. 70% are untargeted. So we're not cutting off the opportunity to do purely investigator-initiated research. I think all of us in this room understand the point that you don't know where the next great initiative is going to come from. It's very hard to predict success in science, and so we want to make sure that we don't cut off that pool at all. On the contrary. Yeah, thank you. Yes. Yes. This was extremely difficult for us right after the moratorium because we wanted to get RFAs out as quickly as possible. And so the timing was really quite haphazard. It was just we did it as soon as we could get it on the street. And so we were off cycle. We now, I think, are back on a cycle where we have new RFAs coming out in March, and we'll have another round of RFAs coming out in the fall. And so that will be the cycle for the future. So the next round of grants, again, we have one under review at the moment, and that is that is for multi-investigator awards, core facilities, and high-impact, high-risk awards. The one that will come out in March will again be investigator-initiated awards, and we will do those most likely once a year on that schedule. We're also driving our reviewers crazy by not being on some kind of a regular cycle, so it's in our best interest to solve that problem.